There was something oddly comforting about the crunch of gravel underfoot and the muffled echo of a pickaxe hitting stone. Minecraft had always been a kind of sanctuary, pixels and logic, rules that didn't shift under your feet, and monsters that behaved exactly the way they were coded to. Predictable. Safe. Unlike the real world, where families cracked apart like dried clay and new houses never really felt like home. The move had been sudden. 1 month, the house still smelled like Mom's favorite candle. The next, it reeked of cardboard boxes and legal tension. Dad got custody. Mom moved states. Everything that used to be constant became scattered across 2 addresses and a courtroom. So I retreated, not to friends, because the new town didn't come with any, but into the familiar hum of my computer fan and the infinite generated world of blocks and biomes. That evening was like most others. I was deep into a solo survival world. No cheats, no mods. I had spawned near a taiga biome and built a modest base into the side of a mountain. After the basics were established, I started digging. Not for diamonds or iron, but for something to do. Some people wander in real life when they're lost. I wandered through caves. I had been tunneling downward for hours, absent-mindedly following a methodical zigzag pattern when the terrain started to feel wrong. The stone was too smooth. Not just polished or cracked, completely smooth. I paused, switched to torches, and placed one beside me. The orange light revealed what I hadn't noticed before. The passage ahead of me was no longer natural. Perfectly straight, perfectly symmetrical. Walls made entirely of smooth stone blocks that couldn't have been naturally generated. Not in this game version. The floor was lined with slabs that gave the illusion of depth, and the ceiling was made of stone bricks, evenly spaced and unbroken. I hadn't built this. No structures spawned this deep, at least not like this. No dungeon spawns, no strongholds. Just an unmarked hallway extending into darkness, like it had been waiting. Curiosity pushed me forward, though every step felt heavier than the last. The deeper I moved into the hallway, the more the ambient sounds shifted. At first, I thought it was the usual cave ambience, the occasional wind, the groan of pressure. But these were different. They didn't sound like part of the game's code. A low hum, almost human. Then, a crackling, like radio static layered under whispers. I turned my in-game volume down, but the noises stayed at the same level. When I tried to backtrack, the game stuttered for a second before correcting itself. A brief flicker in the torches I had placed behind me. I kept going. The hallway finally ended in a cul-de-sac, a single room no larger than a stable. At the very center stood one block, an ordinary stone block with no redstone, no pressure plates, nothing mechanical. But etched into its face, no textures, just raw characters, were 3 numbers. -8, -4, -1999. I stared at it for longer than I should have. Coordinates? Maybe, but the negative Z value was bizarre. I jotted them down anyway, thinking maybe it was some obscure seed reference, a bug, an Easter egg the devs slipped in, something to Google later. Still, something about them crawled under my skin like cold water. I turned back toward the hallway, placing a final torch as I did. The moment it lit, all the others flickered. Just once, a dim blink, then nothing. As I walked away, I noticed the sound were gone. Not just quiet, but missing. No footsteps, no music, no ambient noise at all. I exited the world and shut off my computer. The usual afterglow of gameplay didn't follow me. Instead, I felt like I had looked through a window that shouldn't have been open. Sleep came fast, but it wasn't restful. In the dream, I was digging again. But not in Minecraft. The colors were too sharp. My hands weren't blocky. They were my real hands, caked in wet dirt. The sky above wasn't pixelated, but smeared with gray clouds, heavy and real. I was in a backyard. Not just a backyard, but my backyard, the one behind the new house where the grass still hadn't taken root and the soil always seemed freshly turned. I knelt by the shed, hands frantically tearing through the earth. No tools, just fingernails cracked and bleeding, scooping away chunks of dirt. With every handful, I felt more frantic, more sure that I was getting closer to something. There was something down there, calling, not in words, but in sensation. A gravity of presence pulling me deeper with every dig. I couldn't stop. And then stone. Cold and familiar. A block like the one from the hallway. Except it wasn't part of a game anymore. It pulsed slightly, as if breathing. Carved on its face were the numbers. Same ones. -8, -4, -1999. And beneath the numbers, this time, something new. Something that hadn't been there in the game. A handprint. Human-sized. Fresh. Smudged into the stone like someone pressed it there from below. I woke up gasping, half expecting to find dirt under my nails. Instead, I found a note I didn't remember writing, scrawled in my own handwriting, sitting on my desk, right where my mouse pad had been. All it said was, "Go back." And underneath that, smaller, "He's still waiting." The next morning, the numbers wouldn't leave. They echoed in my head the way a song sometimes gets stuck on a loop, except this wasn't catchy or harmless. It was like a whisper just behind my ears, repeating those 3 coordinates. Over and over. Every time I blinked, I saw them. On the walls. In the dust on my keyboard. They waited for me like a challenge. So I gave in. I loaded up the world again, spawning back in my underground base. The hallway I had discovered was still there. Dark now. The torches gone. Or maybe never placed to begin with. I didn't check. I wasn't interested in going back. My only focus was the journey to that strange location. The coordinates, -8, -4, -1999. I punched them into the debug screen and started walking. At first, the terrain loaded like it always had. Lazy, slow hills and pixelated grass swaying in the windless air. But as I ventured farther, the world began to change. Biomes stitched together in ways that didn't make sense. Icy cliffs bleeding into sunlit plains. Dense jungle merging with desert like a broken quilt. Animals stood frozen in place. Unmoving, unblinking, like cardboard cutouts with no AI left behind their glossy eyes. Chunks stopped loading altogether in places, forcing me to build bridges of cobblestone over voids that shimmered with static. The sky, too, began to darken unnaturally, even though the in-game sun still hovered high. A faint fog began to creep in, thickening with every step. It was like walking into a memory that had been half erased, the details fuzzy and uncertain, but the shape unmistakable. The final stretch was the worst. The game stuttered, skipped seconds, tried to catch up. Every few blocks, it seemed like my avatar jerked backward, as if something didn't want me arriving. But then I did. The coordinates brought me to a clearing in a biome that didn't exist. Fog curled like smoke along the grass. The sky was colorless, a pale, choked gray that felt more like the absence of sky than any weather cycle I'd seen before. Trees surrounded the area, tall and blackened, without leaves or detail, just vertical voids with splintered limbs reaching upward. And there it was. Sitting in the middle of this hollow forest was my house. Not a Minecraft version, not pixel art or a reference build. My actual house, the one I was living in. Every window, every plank of the porch, even the exact chipped corner of the chimney where Dad's ladder slipped last month. It was all there, one-to-one, perfect, real. It shouldn't have been possible. Minecraft didn't generate like that. There was no way it had pulled data from my real life. No mods, no internet connection, no world editing. It just was. I stared at it for a long time. Eventually, I moved forward. The front door creaked open on its own. No sound, just the visual of it swinging wide, like a silent invitation. Inside, the house was just as accurate. The kitchen layout, the flooring, the pattern of the wallpaper that I'd always thought was ugly but familiar. Except now it all felt hollow, like it had been rebuilt by something that only looked at it through a window. There were no lights, no sound, just the soft weight of pixelated dust hanging in the air. I climbed the stairs slowly, the tension building with each block. My skin itched in real life, goosebumps rising on my arms, even though my room was warm. I could feel something waiting, though I couldn't name it. That instinct you get just before you turn on the lights in a dark room. Something was wrong. And it was upstairs. The hallway was identical to mine. Doors spaced out in the same order. Same floorboards. Same crooked light fixture in the ceiling. I walked down the hall. At the very end, where my bedroom should be, the door was slightly ajar. Inside, the lights were off, just shadows and shapes. But I saw him. He was standing in the corner, tall, unmoving, dressed in what looked like a black suit. No texture, no buttons, just smooth and clean. His arms hung too long by his sides. But it was his face, or a lack of one, that rooted me in place. There was no face, no eyes, no mouth, just a flat, blank canvas of skin, stretched over a skull-like shape. Not even a shadow of features. It didn't twitch, didn't react. It just stood there, watching. The game stuttered. One frame froze, then another. The screen warped. The figure flickered, not like lag, but like old film, skipping frames. My keyboard became unresponsive. Mouse movement dragged like underwater molasses. Then the screen went black. The crash didn't show an error message. No return to desktop. Just darkness, like the game had never existed. I stared at the monitor, heart pounding in my chest, still expecting something to flicker back. A sound, a movement, anything, but nothing came. Eventually, I pushed away from the desk. My hands were cold and clammy. The room felt smaller, like the walls had closed in a bit during those last few minutes. I couldn't stop shivering, even after shutting everything down. It wasn't fear in the usual sense. Not panic. It was more like knowing something had seen me and wasn't done. I didn't remember sitting down at my desk again that night. Didn't remember picking up the pencil. But there it was. My sketchbook, open, page after page. The same shape, drawn over and over again in shaky lines, tall body. Faceless head, arms dangling. Every sketch a little more frantic than the last. I must have filled 10 pages before I noticed the sun was starting to rise. Light crept in around the edges of the curtains, bleeding into the edges of the nightmare. For a moment, I let myself believe it was over. Then I heard my dad call out from downstairs. Something about the stairs. I stepped out of my room, bleary-eyed, the air still heavy with unease. At the top of the staircase, I saw it. Dirt, a trail of it, smeared across the steps, as if someone had come up from the basement in the middle of the night. Thick streaks of soil led all the way up, stopping just before my door. No one had been in the basement. No one was supposed to be down there. And yet the house smelled faintly of wet earth. I stared at the stains, a pit forming in my gut. In the silence, I swore I could still hear the faintest sound. The click of a torch, being placed. There are some obsessions that don't feel like choices. They take root slowly, like mold behind wallpaper. Unseen at first, then suddenly overwhelming. That's what it felt like with the house. The replica, the coordinates, the thing I'd seen standing in my bedroom. I told myself I wouldn't go back into the game, that it had gotten too far into my skin. But even as I said it, my hands were already hovering over the mouse, clicking through the start menu. There was no reasoning left, only gravity. And that gravity pulled toward -8, -4, -1999. The first time I went back, everything looked the same. At first, same fog, same ghostly trees. But as I stepped onto the porch, I noticed a change. My parents' bedroom windows were completely boarded up. Inside the house, the door to their room was sealed with planks across it, nailed in with no interface to remove them. As if the game wanted to close that room off. As if something had been locked in or locked out. I left quickly. Later that night, I woke up to find my bedroom door ajar. I never left it open. A cold draft drifted in from the hallway, though all the windows were shut. My computer monitor was on, humming softly, despite me having powered it down hours earlier. On the screen was the Minecraft main menu. The world I had been playing was still listed. Same slot, same save. But the name was different now. It no longer showed the custom name I'd given it at the start. Instead, it was just coordinates. -8, -4, -1999. The cursor pulsed like a heartbeat. I didn't sleep. The next day was harder to explain. I woke up groggy, my room messier than I'd left it. Books off the shelf, clothes tossed around. My phone was missing for half the morning until I found it under the bed. Powered off, battery drained, as if it had been used while I slept. I checked my camera roll. 3 new photos, all pitch black, save for a pale blur in the center of one. Something vaguely human-shaped. I went back to the game. The second visit to the house was worse. The boarded door was gone now, but in the kitchen, every chair had been flipped upside down on the table. One was broken, its legs scattered across the floor in a pattern that almost resembled runes. The fridge, which obviously shouldn't have opened in-game, now creaked slightly when I passed it. Not a real mechanic. A visual glitch, maybe, or a suggestion. I hovered near it, but didn't dare open it. Something felt very wrong about that fridge, like it had teeth. That night, I caught myself doing it again, sketching the figure. This time, I wasn't even aware I had picked up a pencil. I looked down and realized I had filled the margins of my notebook with elongated silhouettes. All faceless. Some had limbs that curled into spirals. Others stood in corners, like they were waiting. And that smell, earth again, damp and thick. It clung to my sheets. I tried deleting the world the next morning. Dragged the save into the trash, emptied the recycle bin, ran a cleanup program, even wiped temporary files. For good measure, I uninstalled Minecraft and reinstalled a fresh version. When I booted the game back up, the world was there. Same name, -8, -4, -1999. No timestamp, no file path, like it had never left. The third time I entered, I was trembling. It looked the same, almost. But there, in the middle of the living room, was a chest. Nothing else had changed visibly. No weird structures, no entity floating nearby. Just the chest, sitting squarely on the rug that matched the one in my real house. Its label read, "Your turn." Inside, there was one item, a dirt block, and beneath it, a piece of paper. I hovered over the paper in my inventory. It didn't say anything, but when I closed the chest, I noticed a new sound in the house. A soft digging somewhere beneath me. Muffled, repetitive, as if something below the house was burrowing up. I logged out. That night, my closet door was open. I was sure I closed it. I tried to ignore it, pulled the covers over my head like I was 7 years old again, and forced my eyes shut. But I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The air was wrong, too heavy, the shadows too sharp. My digital nightmares had bled into the fabric of real life, and I no longer knew where one ended and the other began. The final straw came 3 days later. I returned to the house in-game, drawn by something I couldn't resist, like being reeled in by a hook just under the skin. The backyard was different this time, no longer empty. At the center of the yard, surrounded by pixelated weeds and those dead, leafless trees, was a grave. A single, unmarked grave, dug 2 blocks deep, filled in again with dirt that looked freshly placed. A sign stood at the head. I approached slowly. Dread bloomed in my chest like frost. The sign read my full name. First, middle, last, and beneath it a date. Tomorrow's date. The screen glitched then, just for a moment. The entire world seemed to blink. Colors inverted. The sky flashed red. The grave flickered, and for the briefest second, it looked open again. Something was crawling inside it. Arms or legs, or something that slithered like both. Then the world returned to normal. But I didn't. When I logged off, I saw my reflection in the black monitor screen. There was something standing behind me, just out of frame. Tall, faceless. Reality began to fracture in ways too subtle to prove, but too severe to ignore. At first, it was just fatigue, a constant weight behind the eyes, like sleep was never enough. Then came the flickers. At school, things started to change. In the edges of the classroom, just beyond the reach of focus, trees would twitch and glitch, blocky silhouettes where lockers used to be. Green leaves in impossible square shapes. Flickering pixels in the real world. At first, they'd vanish the moment the mind tried to focus. Later, they stayed longer. Began to shift. Began to move. The sound came next. Soft whispers laced with the eerie, ambient chords of Minecraft's background music. Not in the game. In the hallways. In the silence between bells. A melancholic piano note played when no one else was around, followed by a breath that wasn't theirs. He stopped talking to people. Avoided eye contact, became known, quickly and quietly, as weird. But that didn't matter. Nothing outside the coordinates mattered anymore. His dreams, when they came, were full of stone and roots. Dark corridors, digging sounds that echoed from behind walls. Always beneath, always calling. Then came the night. He had no memory of leaving his bed, no memory of grabbing a shovel. But his parents found him in the backyard at 3 in the morning, standing over a shallow pit, hands trembling. His fingernails were packed with soil, his pajamas soaked in dew and torn at the knees. He claimed it was a dream, but the sweat on his neck, the ache in his fingers, the cold metal of the shovel still clenched in his hand. It was all too real. Later, when he was back in his room, they discovered something else. Sitting beside his bed, half buried under the pile of clothes he hadn't touched in days, was a single stone block, just like the ones from the game. Perfectly square, rough texture, heavy. It hadn't been there before. The house no longer felt like his. Shadows lingered too long. The hum of electronics sounded distorted, like a corrupted audio file. At night, he swore the hallway outside his bedroom grew longer. He stopped turning off the lights. He no longer trusted the dark. In the game, the replica house had changed again. No longer perched far away in its foggy clearing. It now stood just outside his spawn point, like the terrain was folding toward it, like the house itself was moving closer, step by step, as if the coordinates had inverted, coming to him now rather than the other way around. The blocky landscape around it pulsed faintly, almost imperceptibly. The trees leaned in. The sky flickered. The fog had thickened into a permanent shroud. He logged in and out compulsively, unable to stop, unable to resist. The world greeted him each time with silence and dread. The house remained unchanged now, unmoving, as if it were waiting. And then, one day he dug. It wasn't a decision. It was inevitability. His fingers moved before his thoughts. In-game, he entered the replica house, stood in the center of the living room, the same one as his real house, the same warped twin, and began to mine downward through the floor. Wood gave way to dirt, then stone. He tunneled downward, deeper than bedrock should allow. The game offered no resistance. The layers peeled away like skin, and then the world opened. A void stretched out below, limitless, black, and breathing. He fell. There was no fall damage, no sound, just weightlessness. Endless dark. Floating in that impossible space were signs. Wooden, basic, familiar, but wrong somehow. Twisted slightly, as though warped by hands that had only seen signs through a mirror. He drifted toward the nearest one. You shouldn't have come here. The next hovered further away, bobbing gently in a void like a buoy in black water. You let him in. Another sign rotated slowly in place, revealing its message only after a long, excruciating turn. Now there are two. The message carved itself into his mind, a splinter of understanding wedged into his thoughts. This wasn't about a haunted file or a glitch. It was a crossing. Something had been brought through, and now it was not alone. The final sign floated toward him without input. Its text burned brighter, more defined than the others. Which one are you? He reached out. Instinct, reflex, but before his hand touched the sign, the screen exploded into static. The game crashed. But this time, his computer didn't return to the desktop. The monitor stayed black. Except in the center, faint and gray, blocky text shimmered. -8, -4, -1999. And beneath it, in a smaller font, loading spawn. Then his bedroom light flickered, and footsteps began just outside the door. Not running, not rushing, just walking, slow and familiar, as if someone already knew exactly where he was. The morning came like an afterthought. No alarm, no bird song, no light creeping through the blinds. Just consciousness, heavy and slow, like waking from sedation. The room felt colder, though the air was still. Everything looked the same, almost. The bed was on the wrong side of the room, not just moved, mirrored, as if someone had taken a blueprint and flipped it. The window that once faced the backyard now showed the front. The closet door opened to a wall. His bookshelf, once stuffed and crooked, now stood perfectly arranged, filled with volumes he didn't recognize. Their spines were blank. He sat up, the sheets feeling unfamiliar against his skin. The seams were too straight, the fabric too stiff. His hands trembled as he stood, heart pounding, eyes scanning for more errors. The hallway outside his room stretched longer than it ever had. Each step echoed too much. The walls were the same color, but they weren't. The paint felt newer. The family portraits on the walls were distorted. His own face, in every one of them, looked slightly off, tilted, smiling in a way he never had. He reached the bathroom and stared into the mirror. The reflection looked back, but it didn't move. Not at first. It blinked a full second after he did. Its smile faded while his lips remained still. And when he turned his head slightly to the right, the reflection turned to the left. He staggered away, heart hammering, the mirror freezing with condensation despite the room being dry. Footsteps echoed from downstairs. Familiar voices. His parents. He found them in the kitchen, talking, smiling, making breakfast. Except they didn't know him. They spoke to him like a guest, asking if he'd slept well. Their eyes were kind but distant. No words, no recognition. His mother's necklace was on the wrong side. His father's wedding ring was gone. The fridge held jars of food with no labels. The date on the calendar was the same as yesterday. He backed away. They didn't notice. The house was the same in blueprint alone, but nothing was real. The furniture was too clean. The floorboards didn't creak. Even the family dog, who should have been napping in his usual spot, was nowhere to be found. Not even a hair. Not even the smell. He opened the door to the basement. The air was thick, warm, humid with the smell of dirt. And something else, burnt pixels if such a scent could exist. Then he heard it. Click, click, the sound of blocks being placed. In Minecraft, it was an ordinary sound, comforting even. But here, in the darkness beneath his altered home, it was something else entirely. It was wrong, slow, deliberate, like someone building, not for survival, but for ritual. He crept down, each step heavier than the last. The light bulb overhead flickered and died. From the base of the stairs, the glow of torches spilled across the floor. Orange light. Familiar. Wrong. There in the center of the basement, someone was building. Their back was to him. Their hands moved with precision, placing block after block in the shape of a corridor. Smooth stone. Torches every few paces. The figure wore his clothes, his posture, his hair, but it wasn't him. Not exactly. He called out, but the sound died before reaching his lips. No voice, just breath. The figure turned. Its face was his, but pale, waxen, the eyes too wide, too still. A perfect mimicry, but stretched thin at the edges. Unnatural. Then it smiled. Not wide, not malicious, just a simple smile. Understanding. The torches flickered, the walls shifted, and the basement blurred for a heartbeat into something deeper. A hallway. Smooth. Familiar. Endless. He backed away, stumbling up the stairs, heart in his throat. Every surface of the house shimmered like pixels ready to break apart. The floor beneath his feet pulsed. The air buzzed with ambient chords, ones he knew from the game. But now they were louder, closer, alive. He locked himself in his room. But it wasn't his room. Nothing was anymore. The mirror across the hall was gone. In its place, a blank stone block stood embedded in the wall. He stared at it for a long time, unsure if it was real. Unsure if he was. When he blinked again, it had numbers carved into its face. -8, -4, -1999. He hadn't escaped the game. The game had become him. And somewhere below, the other was still building, still smiling, still waiting. He sat in the corner, hands trembling, the notebook open in his lap. Every page was filled with that same figure now. That same face. His face. But the eyes had started to change. They looked more and more like the ones in the mirror. The ones that didn't blink right. The ones that weren't his. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't know which world this is. But I know I should have never gone to those coordinates. -8, -4, -1999. He's in both now.